Before I went to the store, I practiced one sentence in my head. I'd like to return this. I said it a few times because I wanted to sound calm and natural. I thought that once I could say that sentence, the hard part was over. I was wrong. The sentence I practiced was actually the easy part. The real challenge started with everything the employee asked me after that. I walked into the store carrying a shopping bag with a jacket I had bought a few days earlier. There was nothing wrong with the jacket. It was not damaged, and I had never worn it outside. It just did not fit the way I hoped it would. I found the customer service desk and waited for my turn. When I got to the counter, I smiled and said, "Hi, I'd like to return this." The employee said, "Sure. Is there anything wrong with it?" I said, "No, there's nothing wrong with it. It just didn't work out for me." She asked, "Was it the fit, or did you just change your mind?" I told her, "It's a little too big and the sleeves are longer than I expected." She nodded and asked, "Have you worn it?" I said, "Only at home when I tried it on." Then she checked the tags and said, "Great, the tags are still attached." I was feeling pretty confident until she asked, "Do you still have the receipt?" I reached into the bag and suddenly realized it was not there. I checked my wallet. I had checked the small pocket in my bag. I even looked inside the jacket. "Nothing," I said. "I thought I had it with me, but I can't seem to find it." She said, "That's okay. Do you have another proof of purchase?" I hesitated because I was not sure what she meant. Then she asked, "Did you pay by card?" I said, "Yes, I did." She asked, "Do you have the card you used?" I pulled out my credit card and said, "I think this is the one." She tried to look up the transaction. After a few seconds, she said, "I'm not finding anything under this card." For a moment, I thought I would not be able to return it. Then I remembered something. I said, "Oh, wait, I think I used Apple Pay." She said, "That could be why. Do you remember which card is linked to it?" I checked my phone and found the card I had actually used. She tried again. This time she said, "Okay, I found the purchase." I was relieved. Then she asked, "Was this purchased at this location?" I said, "Yes, I bought it here last Saturday." She checked the date and said, "You're still within the return window." I had seen the phrase return window before, but hearing it in a real conversation made it finally stick. She explained that the store allowed returns within 30 days. Then she asked, "Would you like a refund or an exchange?" I planned to get a refund, but I decided to ask about another size first. I said, "Do you happen to have this in a smaller size?" She asked, "What size are you looking for?" I told her the size. She checked the system and said, "It looks like we have one left." I asked, "Could I try it on before I decide?" She said, "Of course. The fitting rooms are right over there." I tried on the smaller size. It fit better, but I still did not love it. The color looked different on me than it had in the store lighting the first time, so I went back to the counter and said, "Actually, I think I'll just return it." She said, "No problem. I can process the refund for you." Then she asked, "Would you like it back to your original payment method?" I said, "Yes, please." She said, "It'll go back to the same card you use with Apple Pay." I asked, "Will it show up right away?" She said, "Usually not. It may take 3 to 5 business days to appear on your account." I asked, "So if I don't see it today, that's normal?" She said, "Exactly. The refund is processed today, but your bank may take a few days to post it." That was useful because I probably would have checked my account 10 minutes later and wondered where the money was. She handed me a return receipt and said, "You'll also get a confirmation email." I thought the conversation was almost over. Then I noticed a sign on the counter that said, "Final sale." I asked, "What does final sale mean?" She explained, "Final sale items can't be returned or exchanged." I asked, "Even if I still have the receipt?" She said, "Usually yes. Final sale means the purchase is considered final." That was definitely something worth remembering. Then I asked another question I had always wondered about. I said, "What if I didn't have the receipt and you couldn't find the purchase?" She said, "It depends on the item and the store policy." She explained that sometimes they could offer store credit instead of a refund. I asked, "So the money wouldn't go back to my card?" She said, "Right. Store credit can only be used here." She also explained that without proof of purchase, the refund amount might be based on the current selling price. That mattered because the item might now be on sale for less than what I originally paid. Then I asked, "What if the tags are missing?" She said, "For clothing, we usually need the item to be unworn and in resellable condition." She added, "Some items also need the original tags attached." I asked, "What about the original packaging?" She said, "That depends on the product." For some things, the packaging was not a big issue. For other products, especially electronics or certain personal items, the rules could be stricter. Then I remembered something else. I had ordered a different item online a week earlier. So I asked, "Can I return an online order in store?" She said, "Most online orders can be returned here, but there are a few exceptions." She asked, "Do you have the order number?" I said, "Yes, it's in the confirmation email." She said, "Perfect. If you bring the item in, we can look it up with that." I asked, "What if I have to mail it back?" She said, "Then you'll usually start the return online and follow the return shipping instructions." I asked, "Do I have to pay for return shipping?" She said, "That depends on the reason for the return and the store policy. If the item was defective or they sent the wrong item, the store would often cover the return shipping. If I simply changed my mind, there might be a return shipping fee." By that point, I realized how many different questions can come after one simple sentence. I had walked in thinking I only needed to know how to say, "I'd like to return this." But a real return can involve the reason, the condition, the receipt, the payment method, the return window, the refund, and sometimes an exchange. And that is why listening practice matters. You do not just need to know what you want to say. You also need to recognize the questions that come back at you. Before I left, the employee smiled and said, "You're all set." I said, "Thank you. I appreciate your help." She said, "No problem. Have a great day." I walked out feeling much more confident than when I walked in. Now imagine the same return happening a little faster, the way it might sound in real life. "Hi, I'd like to return this." "Sure. Anything wrong with it?" "No, it just didn't work out for me." "Do you have the receipt?" "I can't seem to find it. Can you look it up with my card?" "Was it purchased in store or online?" "In store. I bought it here last Saturday. Would you like a refund or an exchange?" "A refund, please." "It'll go back to your original payment method and may take a few business days to show up." "Perfect. Thank you." You're all set. The first time that conversation might feel fast. But after hearing the full situation, those questions start to sound much more familiar. Returning something in English is not difficult because of the first sentence. It is everything that comes after it. And once you have heard those questions enough times, the whole conversation becomes much easier. If this kind of real-life English helps you feel more confident in everyday situations, subscribe and come back for the next episode.